no need for light. People could work by day or by night. There would be, an environment suitable for that. How would I get on there? How would I apply for a job? And suddenly you're catapulting yourself. So the effect of an environment creates a stigma. And then the other big one that we probably come to our minds almost immediately is the stigma created by labels. And I think the message that labels or diagnosis, there was an agreement that sometimes labels are good in that they may give you in the health access to more health services, but often labels create put you in a negative place. And what particularly came across was that these labels can often be arbitrary. So I wonder, Austin asked as well, why is 70 the cut-off for your IQ? Why is above 70 normal, below 70 subnormal? And the answer is, well, there's no particular reason, it's arbitrary. So I think that idea that labels can be set somewhat arbitrarily. And I think at the end what we took away was that we all have prejudices, we need to acknowledge them and to challenge ourselves to see how stigma is being created. Stigma is often fueled by the system within which we find ourselves working. So our health system or education system doesn't give us time to work around the stigma. And there are other ways of helping to break down stigma. Arts are one of the ways that in Austin's education programme. So really interesting way of trying to think about how stigma is created and how we can break it down and try and overcome it. So thanks a million, Austin. I really enjoyed it. I think everybody else who was there did as well.
Thanks, Adele. And next up we might take Una Mead, who's going to speak on the PPI and grant applications. Thanks, Una.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so big thank you to Katrina Greeley from the HRB for facilitating this session on PPI within grant applications. So very interesting session. We had a nice mix of people in the room, about 60-40 in terms of researchers and lay participants and funders. So Katrina just gave us a little bit of a run through around the HRB and what they're thinking in terms of PPI. So PPI they think is important for quality, relevance and the acceptability of our research. Katrina spoke a little bit about the PPI pilot plan, about how they're starting to incorporate PPI within the reviewing of grant applications. So this is kind of a stepwise process that they're initiating and eventually hoping to incorporate feedback from PPI representatives into the scoring systems for grant applications. And they said they're a little bit ahead of the game in terms of where they were going to be at this stage, which is great. So we kind of did a very practical session then looking at some project lay descriptions, lay summaries from 2012, I think it was from the DIF applications. So these were successfully funded projects and their lay summaries. Katrina kind of just, I guess, for information told us that lay summaries should tell us the what, why and how of a research project. So that was kind of useful for our thinking. So we sat in groups and we reviewed these lay summaries and discussed whether we thought they were accessible. And I guess accessible was defined really as something that's like written like a well-written newspaper article that everyone can understand, from policymakers to members of the public to ourselves. So we did that in groups and it was really interesting. I won't have time to go into what we thought about those, but we kind of moved on then to talk about PPI within the research process, distinguishing between participation, engagement and involvement. We talked about examples of PPI and different formats that PPI can take. And I guess really underlying the importance of involvement from the very beginning of the grant application process. So in the kind of why is the research important in the first place. So then we did a nice exercise so we had our project lay summaries within our groups, and then we had a go at thinking about the worst ideas for PPI involvement that we could have for that particular project. And the idea behind that was that by thinking about the worst scenarios, we might then come around to ways of thinking about the best possible ways of doing this. And I think I would give the prize to Siobhan Higgins' team for the worst PPI plan. So congratulations to them. I think that's a totally arbitrary decision on my part. But so yeah, that was fantastic. And you ask Siobhan about her terrible idea later. Then we just went on to talk about schemes that are coming up with the HRB, where you might want to start thinking about PPI now, if you are thinking about those, applying for those projects. So there's the investigator-led projects that will be coming out in August 2018, and the Parkinson's Research Award, which will be December 18, possibly as a date. We did have a very brief opportunity for question and answers, so we talked about maybe how the HRB in the future might think about supporting the kind of pre-application work around PPI, because I think that's a challenge for some of us. And then someone was also asking questions about the accountability. Does the HRB want to check what we're doing with our PPI work in terms of what we promised, what we said we'd fund, and what we actually do? So just very interesting thoughts for the future. Thank you.
Indeed, Una. So next up, finally, is Tim Delaney, then who's going to talk to us about the Spot the Difference qualitative research versus PPI.
Thank you. Thanks, Ruth and Edel, for that session. I kind of wish it went on a little bit longer. It's really enjoyable. So we were looking at qualitative versus PPI. We were trying to approach it from a bunch of different angles, and in the end we were kind of looking at Venn diagrams with post-its on the ground. It was most effective. And so I have maybe 8 points that I think that would summarize it, but one of the most interesting parts I think today for me was just the care as being as much involved as the patient. It certainly came true in the session we just had there, so it's something to keep in mind. One of the main points, I guess, that we kept coming around to was the dual role of the patient in the group, and how it's a little bit different from the qualitative approach, that in PPI, the patient is involved from the beginning to the end. I think, like on Paddy's talk earlier, it was they're not being used, and from the very start, there's a journey together, I guess, is the best approach. Also, it's not just about the numbers. A lot of people look at things and it's just about the data. It's not nice. So it's not just the numbers. It's about the involvement and the honesty with the patient. I think the expert experience approach that Austin was talking about as well, it's really important. And I like that. I'd like that in a conference, just being like, "There's the experts." It's a nice way to go. The main thing that I kind of feel strongly about is the communication about what the researcher's actually doing, the honesty of what the end goals are. One of the points that came up, Niall, I don't know if he's here, was saying, it takes 20 years for an action actually to come out of research. Talking about that there will be a lag time between the research, and talking about whose agenda it is, maybe who the funders are, what the reason for the research being carried out is. I think that was a take-home hit, certainly for me anyway. So then also just the involvement. Some of these groups, in my experience, have been closed-minded in that they've been only a few doctors or a few from a certain trade. There was a lot of talk about involving policymakers or people who are the actual decision makers, maybe government involvement if you want to go down that route. But I thought that was a good point. 2 more points, I'm nearly done. So not being a token, making sure that the patient's not a token. Professor Higgins kind of hit home with that, I think, so I can't really add or improve on what she said, but I think that's pretty strong point. So the actions that came out of it were, the patient voice, the carer voice needs to be heard. Potentially we could have a matchmaking platform or something. I'm not saying like Tinder, but from the research approach, patients who are interested in certain research and a register that they could sign up to. There was a lot of people that wanted to sign up at the end, but there was a bit of negativity in our group of just about how people aren't talking about this. But I think I've noticed this week there's about 3 or 4 events on about PPIs, and so I think it just shows that there is a bit of momentum and movement coming into this space, and just be positive.
Thank you very much, Tim. Now, if you thought you had a difficult day, somebody who's had a very difficult day, I think, is Fiona Keogh from the Centre for Economic and Social Research in Dementia, who's been asked to sort of pull thoughts together and summarise the whole day for us, Fiona. So I hope you're getting well paid for this honour.
Thanks, Andrew. And in spite of the challenge, thanks for the invitation to do this. And actually, no, I've had a really enjoyable day. I think it's been really stimulating. I think the variety of people and perspectives has been just great. So I'm only going to do 30 minutes, is it? No, I'll discipline myself and stick to 10. I could talk easily for 30 minutes. There's so much to say and reflect on, but I won't. I'm going to just, I think, try and capture 3 themes that for me came through really strongly in the presentations today. And I'm going to try and finish with a few reasons, maybe 3 reasons why PPI is a good idea and why we should be doing more of it. And I'm going to use the term PPI for shorthand, but I'm talking about people using health and social care services and the general public. But I'm also talking about everyone in this room. So PPI, I think, fundamentally is about moving away from that us and them, to think about all of us as we all use health services, unless there's any superhumans in the room that I don't know, we at least visit a GP once in a while. So we're all patients. So it is all about us. And I think that's the first theme, I suppose, that came through for me was the importance of being self-aware and reflective if we really want to do PPI well, and not in a token way. We have to be prepared to be open and to be aware of our own shortcomings and biases and how our own life experience has really shaped us and how we think about other people. My first real research job was interviewing several hundred people who used mental health services in the areas of Tallaght and Clondalkin and Dublin, which would be kind of described as very socially deprived areas. And one of the things I really learned from that few years was that it really opened my eyes, I suppose, to how much I had in common with the people I was meeting, but also how the different opportunities I had in my life had kind of led me kind of in a different life path. And I think Austin and Paddy and others really articulated very clearly the importance of that kind of openness and self-awareness that we need as researchers and practitioners if we're really going to engage with people in an honest way. I suppose one of the other things that came through, and I was really delighted to see the specific piece on film, because I think it's really challenging to do PPI well, and there's a lot of kind of practical and logistical challenges around that. And I think we need to be kind of imaginative and creative and can-do and problem solvers when it comes to that. I mean, you know, people, even if it's part of your job, not everyone is comfortable about sort of standing up and talking in a public forum or even speaking up at a meeting. So I think we need to be aware of that, and then there's challenges, you know, people may have communication challenges, or they may be in a hospital bed. So we have to be imaginative about how we access and hear the voice of these individuals. And I think the new developments in media are just fantastic. I mean, we all carry a camera now around in our pocket in the form of a smartphone. And I think the use of video and photos, blogs, I think there's something called vlogs. I haven't seen, you know, video, blogging, Twitter, Facebook, all the things that, not all of them I use, give us a lot of opportunity, I think, to engage with individuals. I mean, I follow a blog of a woman who has dementia, and she posts every day, and it's like 3 minutes. You know, if you're having a cup of coffee, and it just gives you such insights as to just the everyday challenges that she comes across and how she solves them, which is really interesting. So I think, you know, we can use Skype, we can get people to take photos of things that are important to them as ways of feeding into the research process. It doesn't have to be coming to a meeting, sitting down, you know, and the usual way we're used to of interacting. I think that the third theme that came through for me, and I think the kind of the new media and the internet in the last 10 years have been really instrumental in kind of shifting power in all sorts of ways in our society. And I think, you know, kind of knowledge and access to influence has become democratized because we have this powerful thing in our hands called a smartphone. And I think PPI is really the embodiment of that. And any real use of PPI has to acknowledge and speak about power relationships. I think it's something where a lot of us aren't maybe very comfortable about doing, and there's kind of an unease about that. But I think the foray into the area really needs to, as one of the first conversations, to start talking about and acknowledging the differences in power. And I think a lot of the fear is about, it means, oh, so there's no experts anymore, so all the expertise is gone. And I don't think it's about that at all. If I need an operation tomorrow, I want the surgeon who's doing it to be really highly skilled and qualified. But I also want that surgeon to engage with me and talk to me about what's happening and acknowledge the impact on my life and have some awareness of that. So it's about, I think, the experts moving over and making space and recognising and valuing a different type of expertise. And that is of the experience who lives every day with whatever it is, the condition that we're interested in finding out more about. And so it's about rebalancing power, and it's not about losing expertise. It's actually about bringing more expertise into the room. And I think all of the speakers, Agnes and Wendy and Austin, were really spoke very powerfully about that. So just to finish, if we're not already convinced by the proceedings today, why should we do PPI? Why it's not easy. It takes time and effort. So I think there's probably at least three that I was thinking about. One is, for starters, just a straightforward business case. If we want to develop new technologies, new medications, new types of social interventions, these take time and money. They cost. And any designer with any sense would bring the end users in at the beginning of the process instead of the end of the process, or not at all. It makes sense. I think as researchers, I think there's the kind of knowledge and evidence case. So I think to get the best evidence we can, so not just in terms of the kind of quality metrics that we're used to, but the most relevant and the most impactful is if we involve those who are directly affected. And I think there was an interesting question about, well, how do we evaluate the impact of involving people, which Agnes, I think, addressed very well. I think we need to look right across the research cycle. What I heard today was that if we think about, not just the design stage, but also reporting and dissemination and impact, I think that's where potentially actually we can see the biggest impact of PPI, and I think Wendy also spoke very well about this. End users are really invested in the evidence that's produced. It really matters to them in their everyday life. So they're going to be the best and the most active ambassadors in terms of getting the message out there. And they also have much higher legitimacy than researchers because they live it every day. So I think we could get much better impact. I think we could get quicker application of research findings if we involve people who are using services really as early as possible. I think finally, and I'll finish with this, I think the most compelling case for PPI is that it's the right thing to do. I can remember being involved in a, let's call it a robust discussion with some kind of service providers and researchers around the kind of deinstitutionalization of people from residential settings. And the providers saying, well, we really need more evidence before we can do more of this. We need more, we were presenting evidence, good evidence and good outcomes. And, somebody in the midst of the conversation said, if we know that this isn't going to do any harm, and we do, then, do we need evidence to do the right thing? So, we know this is the right thing to do. And I think, we know as human beings that the best way of finding out about what other human beings think about something is to talk to them, to engage with them, to argue and to discuss in a really kind of open and honest way. I think maybe kind of power structures and formal services have sometimes gotten in the way of that. But I think we're finally seeing this recognition of a valid and a different form of expertise. And I think the kind of takeaway for me from today is that if we want to produce really high quality, relevant and impactful research that's really going to make a difference for people, then we can't do it without involving the people who are directly affected. I hope that captures some of the themes from today. Thanks very much. And I think I've just finished on time.
I was just going to say this phone had been left behind, so what we might do is try and answer it. So there's nobody here who's, that's fine. So 3 quick things and we finish. My institution's always fixated on markers of esteem, so you can report to anybody you like that this afternoon you attended a meeting that was trending nationally on Twitter in Ireland. We were in 3rd place as regards trending, beaten by Liverpool versus Roma. There's not a lot we can do about that. And in 2nd place was a social media conference in Trinity. So I mean, if they can't trend on Twitter, what's the world coming to? Second thing I'd like to do is just very much 2 quick thanks to the Health Research Board who have provided funding to the Clinical Trial Network to do this sort of conference in the first place. And really, we couldn't have done it without them. Thank you very much. And then secondly, if I could just ask Breda and Martha to stand up, if that would be okay, and Adele has left the room, if you could stand up, just for us to show a really huge amount of effort. Thanks very much. Like any conference, I think you only get a sense of how much work has gone in how well the day goes, and a huge amount of work was put in by the core team, and thanks very much. And I think that's the first time they've done anything actually ordered to do, so well done. And that's great. Finally then, just to say, obviously, a safe home to everybody. I certainly feel that I'm on a journey with PPI. I'm still very much learning hugely. I think it's great to feel part of a community that's doing it. Because of the HRB now with Ignite nationally with 5 centres, I think we're a national community. And I'm just delighted to see people from different areas, different regions, different institutions. Really encourage us all to continue on to do that. All presentations from today will be put on the CTN website, and please continue the conversation through websites and through Twitter as well, and safe home to all. Thanks very much indeed.